Okay, this seems pretty good. We'll get started. If people trickle in, I'll try to do my best. Already happened. Try to do my best to keep an eye on the waiting room and let people in. But welcome everybody. I hope you all are doing okay enough. Um, Thanks so much for coming to this first sort of workshop and what's sort of going to be a series, but not a really well-defined, like week to week predictable series, maybe a bit of an unpredictable series. We'll say more about that. Um, I'll, let's see, get started by, I have some slides, so you're not going to see much of my face anymore. Can somebody just confirm for me, like with a thumbs up or in the chat, that you can see the slide? Okay, I see at least one thumbs up. Thank you. Perfect. Great. So yes, welcome to this workshop series that I'm sort of calling it, yeah, from crisis to action, sort of addressing this political kind of crazy moment that we're in right now. Um, and to begin, I'll just sort of throw out a broad welcome and say that there's probably a lot of us who are coming into this space from a lot of different places. People from different backgrounds, maybe lots of different emotional states. The sort of past handful of weeks have already been pretty difficult for a lot of us. Uncertain, fearful, sad. Maybe some of us are excited. I don't know. Uh, Maybe if you are, you're maybe not in the right place, but you're certainly welcome. Um, we're all joining in with different worldviews, takes on the world, ways of understanding things. But this space, even though I already slipped and sort of like made fun of a certain type of person, but this space I want for us to be one that's really safe, welcoming, and open-minded, and a space that's, not punitive as we're sort of processing this moment and thinking about these difficult political things. I want it to be a space where, you can feel heard by each other, can hold our emotions, negative or positive, and it'll be really constructive for all of us. Uh, and really quick, it's kind of freaky. I haven't done this in a while. I feel like I haven't done this since the pandemic, but just some really brief Zoom norms, even though I think a lot of us are really used to Zoom at this point. Yeah, please try to keep yourself muted if possible. I do have some kind of power to mute you all, but I'm like, juggling. I think if you saw my screen, you'd probably be like, this man's insane because there's like five different windows up at the same time. So I might, not be able to find the mute everybody button. So if there's some noise going on, just try to mute yourself. Um, and feel free to use the chat, but use it, yeah, sort of in a way that like, you can, resonate with things or throw out sort of like small reactions. But if we all know like those Zoom meetings where it blows up into like a whole side discussion and it's a bit distracting from stuff, so try to be focused and use the chat. And then get yourself comfortable. Maybe get a glass of water. I have my water here. You can get maybe a pen and paper. We're going to be doing some drawing, some writing, individual reflecting. So, get some stuff if you need to get it, or if you want to type on your computer, that works too. And also just note that I'll be recording this, and this will probably make its way onto YouTube or some other kind of internet place. So if you want to remain anonymous and don't want to be recorded, feel free to shut your video off, change your name. You can get creative and name yourself something really fun. So I giggle at it when I'm looking at it later. But just, yeah, keep in mind that I'll be recording this. And of course, if you need to step away from the call at any point, feel free to do so, join back later. I'm not going to try to go super late with this, so hopefully we won't, tire out. But if you do happen to step out, one thing that I found useful is you can kind of like change your Zoom name if you know how to do that, to just say like, oh, this is my name, but I'm away. Just so if you get put in a breakout and someone's like wondering where you are, they'll know that you've stepped away. So thanks for being great Zoom participants. I'll briefly introduce myself. My name's Nick. I use he, him pronouns. Uh, Many of you know me, which is very cool. I'm so happy to see familiar faces. A lot of you I don't know, which is equally cool to me. I'm excited to get to know some of you all. Maybe I'll see you through multiple workshops. Um, but some useful things to know about me. I mean, I'm opening the space to sort of talk about this political moment and, opening multiple spaces to talk about how we address it and how we should think about it. So you may just be like, okay, who the heck is this guy? What, reason does he have to be doing this? Well, I'm not a perfect expert at this stuff, but I've gained a decent amount of political, uh, change work experience over the past 8 or so years. I've worked with different community groups like Sunrise Movement, working on climate issues, dissenters and Massachusetts chapter of Peace Action, working on peace and war and anti-militarism types of issues. My most recent, headache but fulfilling experience was organizing graduate students at Tufts University to be in a labor union, which was a really fulfilling experience. And that's where I just sort of came from. I just finished studying at Tufts University, doing my PhD, actually studying misinformation and how political beliefs change. So I think about this stuff all the time. I think it's very pertinent right now because I think a lot of us are wondering why a lot of people are holding the beliefs they believe or acting in the way that they act, and how we can maybe address some of these things. So I'm just hoping to share some of my experience with you, but really make this space sort of like co-constructive. So I'm throwing out some ideas, but we're also getting a lot of time to, participate with our own ideas, have group discussion, and I'll learn just as much from you all as you may learn from me, and you'll learn from each other. So it's not just a lecture, because I'm probably not qualified for that. But and I wanted to shout out a thanks for those who helped me review this kind of idea that I'm putting together so far. So thank you to everyone on the list. Maybe it'll grow in the future. Very briefly, I mentioned that this is one workshop in a loose series that's not going to be really week to week, but will kind of happen. I won't say haphazardly, but keep your eyes open for when the next ones are. The personal reason is that I'm actually moving across the country very soon. And we have the holidays coming up and everything. So yeah, it's a bit of a chaotic time, but I wanted to at least get one session out so people can, start thinking about these things, and we can just sort of build a big, list, and I'll let you know as the sessions get scheduled in the future. But this specific one is, sort of the first in a chain, where we're going to try to open some space to process this political moment, give it a bit of structure, so it's not going to be totally loose. We'll have some ideas that'll maybe help us think through this, and then get sort of an idea of what might be coming down the line and what we can be doing in between the time that we meet here and when we maybe meet later. Okay, that's a lot of spiel from me. Now I'm going to turn it all to you. So we're going to start thinking about this moment. So this whole space tonight is dedicated to thinking about this moment. I'll be really curious to hear from a lot of you, like how you've been talking about this moment thus far, because I think it is a big one. I think a lot of us are feeling the weight of it, but if you're anything like me, I've talked about it with some people, but not with everybody. And I think it's actually pretty interesting to think about why we talk about these things with some people and not with others. But first, let's think about ourselves. So this is our first sort of reflection activity, and you can utilize your pen and paper, you can type on your computer, you can think in your head. But let's just sort of ground ourselves in sort of who we are coming into this space, coming into this thinking. Two sort of groups of things that you can think about. You can think about your social identities and positions. So things like your gender, race, ethnicity, language, where you're from, your age, ability, physical, emotional, developmental, your spirituality and religion, your social and economic status. So think about these things. I put I don't know how many of them there are, maybe like 16 or something like this. On a wheel, these are, not an exhaustive list, but some things you can think about. And then on the other side are sort of political and group identities, which are useful for us to think about. So take some time to think about like, okay, what's your political affiliation? Who are you in terms of political involvement? Are you like very involved? Are you hoping to be involved? What sort of values do you bring to the equation? Any issues you care about? Communities you're a part of? And this one really tickled me when I was doing some research to put this together, but it's useful to think about what was your political socialization? How did you grow up? That's kind of fun to reflect on. So take a few minutes. I'll just mute myself and you all can sort of think on your own, maybe do a little writing, and I'll bring us back in a couple minutes. And feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Sorry to interrupt. I told you I'd shut up, but a couple people just joined in. So I just want to really quickly repeat, thanks for joining in. We're just doing a sort of individual reflection right now. I put up some social identity categories and some political identity categories on the screen. We're just taking a few minutes where you can sort of reflect on these and write them down, and we'll be using them in a bit. So I'll come back in a couple minutes. Okay. If maybe this will work. If you feel like you've like satisfyingly thought through these, maybe just put I don't know, like a 1 in the chat. If you need more time, put a 2 in the chat. Okay, so far only ones. Y'all are speedy. Okay, well, unless someone really strongly protests, we'll move on. So thanks for writing those down. Um, let's take some time to use these for our like first kind of thinking about this question then. So I think it's useful for us when we're thinking about this moment of change and we're thinking about the things that we're disappointed about, afraid of, fearful of, etc. It's useful to sort of reflect this through our different identities and including, social and political identities. So like there's reasons basically that we care about what we care about, and there's reasons that we think about what we think about, especially in this moment. So, I was thinking of doing this as an individual thing, but let's actually just like start talking to each other. Now, I'm a bit curious because I know I wrote this in a couple of the descriptions for this, but maybe I already used ones. I'm curious if people are coming to this like with already a group of people, or if people are coming to this individually. If you came here with a group, um, maybe put like a plus in the chat. And if you came here individually, I don't know, what's another fun one to put? Maybe just put a minus. Not that it's a bad thing, but just pluses and minuses. It'll help me keep it straight. Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's a couple at least groups. Very cool. Okay, so I think here's what I'm going to have us do. Because some of us are here individually and some of us here are in a group, I'm going to just open like I don't know, maybe 15 breakout rooms. And if you want to just sort of put yourself in one, I guess, because you have someone there physically present with you, just sort of, seclude yourself and do this activity, reflection with whoever's there with you. If you're in a group with someone over who's also joining over Zoom, just get yourselves into the same breakout group. But if you came individually, just try to like stick yourself in a breakout group with some other people. Maybe try to keep them like, 3 to 4, 4 max, maybe, so people get enough time to think with each other. But it's kind of this, I realize it might be a bit difficult because you all don't know who each other is, but just think of it like, you're in school, you're in the classroom, it's like the first day of a new class, and you're like, okay, I gotta like group up with some people I don't know. So think of it that way. I think you all on the call are very nice people, so I wouldn't be too scared of meeting some nice people. So I'm gonna make 15 rooms. Hopefully this works. And I'll bring us back in about, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes. Just start talking about, yeah, saying like how you're feeling in this political moment of change, and try if it feels right to like relate it to, oh, the things that I'm worried about or the things I'm thinking about, I particularly care about because of my position XYZ way or the issues I care about. So yeah, have fun. I'll bring you all back in like 10 minutes or something. Hey, welcome back. It must have been good discussions because everyone opted to get zapped back at the very last moment, which is great. Um, yay. Okay. I'd love to hear a couple share backs if you all want. Thinking about or like thinking about sharing like something that you shared in your group. or maybe something that someone else said that really struck you. If you want to share, maybe put an asterisk in the chat. So we'll have sort of an orderly way of like having folks share back. And I'll call on people and then hopefully you can unmute yourselves. But put the asterisk in first and then I'll see who seems wanting to speak. Ari, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Sorry, I'm also trying to like eat dinner because I gotta work late tonight. So it's like I'm going back and forth. But yeah, we had a really lovely group. We only made it through the like, how are you feeling this moment of political change question. But we all got to share out, which was really lovely. And I think a few takeaways. A lot of us talked about like actions we're taking, actually, less about the feeling and more about the like stuff we're doing, but everyone's doing really cool stuff. Like folks are like organizing their thoughts about how to resist this moment. People are seeing like more and more people join their various like groups. Let's see, folks are organizing to leave like cards in different languages for undocumented residents that like help connect them to resources and stuff. I've been just like making a lot of friends and like building out my community, which has felt really good. So it was a lot of like taking action in many different ways, all of which were very like community focused, which was nice.
Very cool. Thanks
Mhm.
for sharing back, Ari.
Mhm.
Maybe we could hear from Susan Blaine, if you want to unmute yourself and share a bit.
Sure. What I liked was being with people I didn't already know from different places instead of the same people. You know, I do like to talk to the people I talk to all the time. I don't want to put them down, but just it was good to have different perspectives from people that I didn't know, and you know, we got some things in common and probably some things that weren't. It's always good to break out of a little dungeon that I live in and connect with people out in the world.
Yeah, so true. I think if things go as planned, thinking about how to break out of our respective dungeons will be something that we'll think about together in a later workshop. I think that's real though. Yeah. I'm glad you got to talk with some new people. Anyone else want to share back? If so, you can put a little asterisk in the chat.
How do you put that asterisk in the chat?
Oh, if you let's see, if you look at your bottom sort of bar on Zoom and then click the sort of chat bubble icons, then it should open sort of a side panel, I think, where you can click where it says type message here and you can put a star. So that's general advice for anybody. But Sylvia, it seemed like since you asked, you maybe want to share. Do you want to share? I gotta unmute yourself first, though.
We have
Oh,
Susan Blaine and Susan Mursky that put asterisks.
oh, okay. Well, first, Sylvia, you were muted when you were saying what you were saying. Do you want to unmute first?
Oh, just I was in Aristotle's group. She did a great job of saying what we were. So thank you. I just wondered about the asterisk. So
Oh, perfect, perfect. So we heard from Susan Blaine. Did someone say Susan Mirsky put a star in the chat? Or is that a false star?
I I would like to throw it over to Odile. She said something at the very end of our session. And then after that, maybe, you know, David, you looked like you were taking great notes. But what did you say at the very end?
well, first I would like to say that David Boris from Peace Action Chicago said that we must take as our principal stand human dignity. And I said, that's very good. We can use that as we go we work with others, but if we are in a large coalition, we first must look at all the demands and then work together to find a common ground. Is that what I was saying? I think that's what I was saying when I was leaving. Before we say that we must do that first, we have to listen to what others have to say.
I like that a lot. David, did you want to say anything too?
Sure. I was just saying that Chicago Area Peace Action organized our annual event that we did in October, which we planned. We chose our subject matter in March or April, and we were revolving it around human dignity. The idea that what if we envision a society where its guiding principle is human dignity? And we made a promise to our constituents that we would spend the next 12 to 18 months rooting every piece of our work, whether it's climate justice, economic justice, social justice, but we would make certain that it was linkable to and rooted in that concept of human dignity. In the moment when we're looking at the immigration, the immigration issues, because I don't want to call it a crisis, because I don't think it is a crisis. I think it's the made-up immigration issues and the otherizing of so many. I think that what I was saying in our group is we need to be extraordinarily cautious that we don't fall into the same trap, right? Why are they so ignorant? Why do they not understand anytime we're intoning that pronoun in that way, we're violating principles that should be inviolable as we try to move a message of social justice forward. It's not for us to explain to them, right, why the pain they felt, the 80 million or 73 million Americans that voted for what is certain to be a very, very disturbing administration, why they didn't understand what they were doing. No, I think better that we need to understand what the driving forces that created that were. And it doesn't mean that we have to compromise our principles, but it does mean that we have to be able to meet them where they're at and be able to have a conversation. I don't want to dominate this completely, but I want to throw this out to everybody because I think it was really, really important. It's a podcast. The New Yorker Radio Hour 4 days ago did a 45-minute interview with Sarah McBride, the first transgender member of Congress. I encourage everybody to listen to it. It is brilliant in its encapsulation of grace, space, and growth. And I think that's a path for us to move forward on.
Thanks for the thoughts, David, and Odile as well. Yeah, these are very good thoughts. Thanks for sharing them out. I think it probably resonates with a lot of people. I saw some enthusiastic sort of looks as you all were sharing back. So yeah, I think for the sake of time, because I don't want to take you all past the next hour 30, whatever time zone you're in. For me, it's 8:30. We're gonna keep hold on to the thoughts. There will be more time to share, but we're gonna sort of progress a little bit if I figure out how to work my own tech. And definitely, if you have resources, like the thing that you just mentioned, David, yeah, put it in the chat for sure. So great. Whoa, I think it's going backwards or something. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so the reason that I was, that I think it's useful for us to articulate, what we're feeling and also what we're doing. It seems like a lot of you all are already taking action, sort of through the lens of, who we are, where we're coming from, etc. I think you all sort of articulated pretty well is that, the things that we're concerned with are maybe not necessarily the things that other people are concerned with. And it's really our task, I think, when we're doing this work, to try to figure out genuinely what other people who are not yourselves are concerned with. And usually that takes a lot more listening than saying, which is something that I'm guilty of. Sometimes I say more than I listen. But I think that's part of our task in this moment, is sort of figuring out what's going on for all sorts of different people. So it seems like you all are doing that, which is great. And I was going to say a bit about what, sort of my view of this moment was, but, you all don't really care about what I have to say. No, I'm just kidding. But just to be brief, it's more or less that I agree with some of the things that were already said. I think it's just a tricky moment. Our politics are sort of in a place where a lot of people, I think, are disappointed and discouraged for a lot of different reasons. And I think if I've noticed anything over the conversations that I've had with people prepping these workshops and just in the aftermath of, I don't know, even just the last handful of years, it's just that there's a lot of points of view that we need to understand, including those from people who we often don't want to talk to because maybe they hold points of view that we don't agree with. Sometimes we do some like choir preaching, which is fine because we also have to hold each other and be with people who understand us. But there's a lot of thoughts and feelings out there that we need to gather. And one of the other things that I've been thinking about a lot that's motivating these workshops that I just want to mention is that I think we can take some time as well, since you all were talking about actions you're taking, to reflect on the actions that we've been taking over the past, few large political cycles and be like, how effective do we think they are? Do we want to change anything? Should we be, working with different people, using different tactics? And that's all what's coming. What was this slide about? Yeah, that's basically already what I said, just sort of laying out that we can think about all these questions together and figure out how to be effective moving forward. So I want to use the rest of our time more or less to do one more sort of reflective activity and group share. I think it's always my humbling lesson that the group shares take longer than I budget for. So I'll keep that in mind next time. But let's do one more reflection that I think is really useful and interesting. So if you have a pen and paper, this is the time to use it. If you don't, try to do your best with like whatever supplies you have on your computer or anything like this. But we're basically going to do sort of a mapping exercise that I think is pretty useful. So I'll give you, 10 seconds to get your paper. Just kidding, like 5 seconds. So, okay, what I want you to do first is just sort of, draw like a dot or something somewhere on your page that represents you. This is, the same person that you thought about in the last activity with all your different identities and political sort of beliefs and affiliations. This dot is very simple, but it represents an incredibly complex person. Obviously, you know how complex you are. And then I want you to start to think about some of the people who are closest to you. Also draw them as dots, maybe like, form like a ring or sort of a periphery around the dot that represents you. You can label them with their names. So you're sort of looking at like who's on your list. And once you draw the dots for other people, you can also connect them to yourself with a line, since obviously you know them. And if any of them know each other, you can connect them to, you're making like a little network. So it may be, I don't want to put thoughts in your head, but it may be close friends, family. You may be close with people that you work with, partners, etc. And once you've, thrown down a couple of those, think a little farther out, sort of expand, the scope of your network. People maybe even a bit more peripheral who are maybe, less close friends, but still good friends. People that you've known a while from work or groups you're a part of. And you can, sometimes when I draw this, I draw them a little farther away from me to sort of, you can imagine like a close circle and a bit farther out circle. And you can probably anticipate where I'm going next. You can broaden a bit more and think of some maybe acquaintances, people you don't know super well, draw them even a bit, further out and, continue to label them, say their names, and connect them to yourself and connect people who may know each other as well. So as you're doing that, I don't want to rush you, of course, so take your time with it. But you may start to notice that some of the people that you're putting down on your sort of map share similar spaces. They're part of similar groups. Probably you've like met them through some sort of group. So it always gets a bit messy because you weren't drawing them with like the grouping in mind originally. But if you happen to see like a cluster of dots that are all like a part of a certain group, feel free to sort of, like dot a circle or something around them and label the group. Or if they're kind of far apart from each other, you can just kind of take note of like what groups exist and who's sort of shared in that. So we're only doing a sort of brief version of this right now. There's sort of a longer way to do it where we can use this sort of way of thinking to think about all sorts of different things. But suffice to say, this is a brief sort of snapshot of you and your sort of place in what I like to think about as the political ecosystem. I call it sort of an ecosystem. I think that word makes a lot of sense because it's sort of a very dynamic thing that's growing and, lots of different organizations and groups and people working all at the same time to do different things where we interconnect with each other. It just gives it a vibrancy that I think is better than calling it like a network or something that, maybe my thesis advisor would have called it. But I like calling it an ecosystem, so it is an ecosystem. So we can use this sort of thing that we drew to do some thinking. So take a look, at who you labeled down, who you drew, and just sort of ponder some of these questions. These are the ones that I think are kind of fun to think about, like, okay, who on your network would you turn to if you needed support? That's kind of a nice one to think about, right? Sometimes I think of the flip as well. Who do you think would turn to you if they needed support? You can just kind of glance at your folks and take tally of it in your head. And then you can think a little more pointedly, when you're looking at people in your network, who do you think would want to, maybe process this new political moment with you? Any of the names seem like people who would want to maybe talk about, the fears of the moment, the maybe excitement of the moment, whatever. And then I think the real key thing that we're going to spend more time in future sessions thinking about is when you take a look at the people you wrote down and you imagine, say, like asking them to come to like a workshop or asking them like, hey, do you want to like get lunch? I would like want to talk about this kind of crazy political moment we're in with you. Or inviting them to an action like, hey, come to this protest with me. What feelings come up? I think this is a super interesting thing to think about because when I draw my own network, I notice that there's some people who I'm like, oh, I could ask them any day of the week. And then there's other people who, when I think of talking to them, I get a little scared. And I'm like, ooh, what would they think of me? You know, would they think I'm some sort of weirdo or radical or, you know, something like this? Um, so let's, what did I write? Let's just, so I think let's have like one more breakout, and hopefully, I'm like hoping we can get in the same rooms because I think that was kind of helpful to be with the same folks. Um, thanks for coming, David. Hopefully you can come to a future one. But let's sort of use now also this like network that we drew out and sort of thinking about like the feelings that come up in, you know, bringing people in to talk about this moment and process this moment. And let's share with each other, like, you know, maybe when you're looking at your own network, who stands out, you know, maybe why do they stand out? Who are you thinking of sort of taking action with or grouping up with? And we'll talk about that for a few minutes and then I'll bring you back. And definitely let me know if you have any questions in the meantime, but I'm gonna open the rooms. I think you all are in the same ones as before. Let me know if that's not the case, but you should just be able to join back. Yeah. Welcome back, Linda.
Nick, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure I can get a group of people to come and watch these. And I remember getting the email saying that the idea was to have groups of people in the same area, but people seem to be spread out all over the country. And so I'm just, I guess, questioning whether the model is going to work for me, at least.
Right. That's a good question.
In the afternoon for me, and you know, I know a lot of people, and we're all really busy with a lot of things, and I can get myself here, but I'm not sure how, you know, I can't speak for other people.
Right. That's a good question. Linda, for folks who just came back in, Linda was wondering sort of about the model of participating in sort of a small group. Like, what do you do if the people you're thinking about are sort of like, yes, very busy, scattered across time zones, maybe, just essentially difficult to organize. I think that's a very, very good and real question. One that definitely deserves more time to think about than we actually have. But maybe, yeah, I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on it, Linda, maybe after. Shoot me an email and maybe we can think together about it a bit, because I'm sure you're not the only one. I'm sure other people are having this problem as well. But for the sake of, I suppose, completing this sort of train of thought, I'd be curious, did anyone, yeah, have some interesting discussion in the group? Anyone want to briefly share back? You can put like a little star in the chat and maybe we can hear from like 2 people. Aaron.
Old. I'm not always the one to speak, but Nancy and I had a really lovely conversation. I think one thread that we kind of touched on is sometimes thinking about who we're comfortable being the most vulnerable with. Sometimes it's people that are total strangers rather than those that are closest to us. That was just one observation. And this was my own personal, is that I'm almost like most fearful to pull in my family, but I am curious to challenge myself to also go to the group that I'm most fearful about. And like kind of test it out and just see if I can rip the band-aid off and get any of them here.
I love that thought and share back. Thanks, Aaron. Sure people resonate with that. Susan?
There were a variety of thoughts. Marcia has her daughter living really close by, and that's wonderful and a real plus. Something new that's happened. And Odile has family that live in France and in London, and she talked about Zoom and the great wonders of, of communicating that way. And James has a wide variety of connections from everything that he's done and groups that he's been involved with before he got involved with peace stuff.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing back, Susan. Yeah, I love hearing, how expansive the, ecosystems are, and that y'all are zooming with each other. Very cool. Sylvia, really briefly, if you want to share back, super brief, and then we'll go on.
Yeah, really briefly, we were 3 Quakers and 1 person, Aristana, who isn't. And she brought up a very interesting thing about how sometimes when you're dealing with couples, you don't ever really break through the coupledom, And I had to mention this was something we really took up back in the day in the early 70s, and it's brand new because everything's changed, and people who didn't think they'd ever encounter nuclear families are in one. So it's hard to get to the individual to have that conversation, Aristana was saying.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I echo what Ari just put in the chat. I would also love to hear how folks were thinking about that before, and now that we're experiencing the same thing. Very cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm sure it's going to be a PhD subject one of these days.
I hope so. I would read that. Yeah, maybe we'll have to think of some way, because I know the conversations get truncated and they're quite short, but there's all these nuggets of wisdom. Maybe I'll spend some time before the next workshop thinking of ways that we can sort of collect our wisdom, like in some shared document or something like that. Because I would love to have you be able to write that down, Sylvia, and some of the other things that folks were saying. So just as an aside, I'll think about that. So great. I'm always sorry to cut the thinking short. We could truly just spend the whole time just chit-chatting, but I want to let you all get on with your lives as well. Not that this is not your life. This is also your life. And it's my life too. Basically, I think, yeah, we'll do some more of this like ecosystem sort of networky type thinking in future sessions as well. But just as an entry point, I think it's a really useful way of making very concrete sometimes what is like just in our head. And it puts in perspective that, we do live these sort of complicated social interpersonal lives where a lot of people are coming from different places. We feel certain ways about talking with people versus, other people. And sometimes it seems like it's really hard and we wonder, oh, should we be talking to these people? Should we try to bring these ones in? So it's just a nice way to lay it out in front of us and sort of see what avenues we have to make connection, to eventually, as we'll talk about, like exert power and connect and whatever, make influence. And it's sort of, I wanted to include in this like just brief version of this exercise now, because as I was sort of alluding to, and we were talking about before, when we were talking about how I was encouraging participation in groups, this is something I want you all to think about, and is going to sort of be a theme through these sessions, is an idea that I've been having that at least most other people I've talked to think is a pretty good idea if doable, is sort of like shifting our political orientation of how we participate. From a lot of us do a lot of individual politicking, which is mostly like consuming news, maybe being on social media, even though it is like, ostensibly connecting to people, but we're consuming a lot, and we have these really rich inner political lives, right, in our brains and our bodies. Or usually the other alternatives are getting involved in something that's quite large and can maybe be quite intimidating, like joining a nonprofit sort of organization, maybe a political like electoral campaign, or, you know, working with someone who is a politician, I don't know, working in DC or something like that. And it's sort of like two almost really, and they're not polar opposites, but they're quite far apart opposites. So I've been thinking about what would it look like to sort of engage somewhere in the middle. This is what I'm playing around with calling sort of like having a pod. And the pod, I'm thinking, this is why I encourage you all to do, to like bring sort of a small group, is this idea of what would it look like if we did some of our political life in sort of smaller groups that are maybe, you know, a group of friends, or, you know, maybe pull in a colleague and some friends of those friends, but just a sort of small group that maybe meets regularly to just sort of talk about things, like talk about the news, maybe do a book club. Maybe you all are involved in different organizations. Like some people are like working in peace, some people are working in climate, some in immigration. And you all get to sort of share what's going on in the different organizations and get an idea of sort of the broader sort of movement space. And, you know, it could be a group that even takes, you know, small actions together, like going to a thing or volunteering in the community, or, you know, maybe larger actions as well. But I think we almost, I mean, this is true of my experience. So I'll be curious to hear later from other folks as we think about this more. I think it's been true of my organizing experience that we sort of shy away sometimes of just doing smaller things like with friends or having sort of a core group that's a bit more personal. And when we bring it to the individual, it's you know, hyper personal, and we bring it to the org, it's a bit distancing from our lives. It's almost professional in that sense. So what would it look like to sort of do this in our normal lives sort of groups? Yeah, I would love, I guess, for you all to think about that as we go forward. And what did I put? Like, as you sort of look at this thing that you drew, sort of how we were thinking about, oh, it seems like maybe I could reach out to this person and maybe I could bring this person in. Yeah, who from your network might be like a worthy pod member? Who's someone you maybe want to, you know, you could bring to these workshops and sort of have doing discussion in this space. I think ideally it would be really cool in my mind if we sort of formed these pods and brought them to these sessions. And then in between the sessions, it's sort of like, you know, this session was just sort of a brief example of some things we can be thinking about. And then you take them back to the pod, or you take them back to the, you know, organization and think about them with other people as well. That's my ideal. Maybe people have other ideas. And there's definitely logistical challenges like you all were bringing up earlier, but maybe we can figure this out together. But I want to just sort of briefly conclude by saying some of the stuff that I want to do with you all in the future, open space for. I put it sort of on this website link that I threw up. But I think, you know, from what I heard you all articulating, it's sort of this idea is in the air that we need something a bit different. We need to sort of like tap into different networks. We need to maybe change up some tactics or take action in different ways or listen to different people who haven't been listened to before. So I had been thinking similar things and sort of culminated it into sort of different topics that we can think about. One, sort of like thinking about the ecosystem and further mapping the network, but also thinking about how we can use these sort of networks and groups that we're a part of in conjunction with theories of change, sort of going over like what people write about in like organizing books or people who sort of study this as like, okay, how can you exert power? How can you change political systems? But also in this moment, maybe taking a step back from theories of change and thinking about what I've been calling theories of defense. Like, I think probably the incoming political landscape is going to throw a lot of things at a lot of people who are already pretty vulnerable. So what would it look like to sort of, you know, use these networks we've been building to try to like distribute resources, to take care of each other, to preserve like the health of our groups and each other, you know, thinking about different forms of solidarity. And then, of course, thinking also about how we're trying to grow our organizations, our pods, our ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, sort of coming from the place of we're going to spend some time thinking about the major sort of political moments, at least mostly from the perspective of the United States, because I think a lot of us are most familiar with that, and I certainly am. To sort of think about what have been our successes, what have been maybe our shortcomings, and how can we move forward a bit more effectively. I think we'll, more or less stumble upon part of the answer is that we need to build more power and we need to bring in more people. So then we'll think a lot about what does it look like to sort of build out our bases, reach out to other people, sort of do what we just did with the ecosystem mapping and be like, can I deal with my feelings about including other people in my political life who I usually don't? Stuff like this. So that's all coming up. In the meantime, between now and maybe the next session, TBD, if you weren't able to come in a group, maybe think about this idea of the pod, try to maybe organize one for yourself. I'd be curious to see if it works, what it's like for those who do manage to put it together. And then I put down some questions that could be useful to process in these types of groups. And it's basically what we thought about today. So, how are you feeling after the election? What are some thoughts coming up? How do your identity and position inform what's coming up for you? How does it mesh with other people's position and identity? What do you feel you need in this moment? And are there others in your ecosystem that you want to have this conversation with? So these are things to think about. In the meantime, I'll send out an email to all the people who registered. If you, I guess, want anyone else to be on the list that receives emails and these prompts, and I'll send out the slides and the video and stuff, I think just have them register through that same Zoom link. Hopefully it won't disappear, but I'll try to keep that bit.ly, I'll put it in the chat, the bit.ly active. Crisis. I think this is what I called it. If you go to that website, that should have all the links and the sign up and everything. If you want to get other people involved, just share that link with them. But that was more or less all I planned for today. If you have any concerns or thoughts or questions or anything you want to share with me, that's my email. Definitely get in touch. I'll announce the sort of future sessions as I have time to put them together. But I'm really grateful for everyone spending some time tonight to come out.